Hi, welcome to Understory. We've been looking at culture wars, American politics, elections, and all sorts of things in Australia. But around that, circling around that, is economics, the economic impacts of what countries decide to do from a policy point of view and what's happening globally. And right now, we're entering an incredibly uncertain phase economically. So what we thought we'd do is do a little series on economics and how that might affect you, your life, your household, and where we go as a country. So Nick, we've got a few things to talk about going forward.
Yeah, we've got a whole lot of things to cover. And of course, economics is such a fundamental issue, such a fundamental topic. And there's a lot of different pieces of it that are so interrelated with how they affect our lives, but politics, how we've voted. And so it's a massive topic, but a very interesting
and don't worry, we're not going to get too heavy and intense on this, not too silent. We're not economic experts. We're going to call on those who are. We're going to look at what they're saying and try and put it into some sort of distilled package so we can make sense of where things are going. Because right now, the markets are reacting, people are uncertain, fuel prices and so on. So we'll dig into that over the next few little episodes. But basically, like you said, economics is really about the managing of, the actual word means the managing of household assets and resources. That's what it means in the Greek. So economia. So what would that mean for you, managing your household? For example, I was talking to someone the other day and they said, well, if your food price goes up from $100 to $200 by the end of this year, how would you pay for that, assuming you don't have any more income? You know, have you planned for that? I mean, it's really basic.
And what other thing are you spending $100 less on?
Correct. So there's opportunity cost.
That's right. And so everything in economics is driven by this overarching reality that there's finite resources on this planet. And there's only so much getting around.
So it's really like, if we keep it really simple, it's about living. It's about how you live your life, how you plan your life, how you exchange in your daily activities. And do you have the resources to navigate, right?
Yeah, I think that's really useful. And that's something I learned several years ago. I didn't used to know what economics was. I didn't pick it in high school. I thought it was like accounting, all about money and all about numbers. But economics actually can be very interesting if you think about it without money. Don't think about where the money's going. Economics is the fact that in Central Australia, there's thousands of oil wells continuously producing oil and gas that's flowing through pipes, that's flowing into the pipes that feed my stovetop so that I can cook. Economics is the fact that there's, oil wells over here, there's trees over there, there's refineries over here and plastic plants over here that are making polyesters, that are making eventually all the clothes that I'm putting on my back. It's all of the goods and resources that flow from us and to us in our lives. And our culture, in my opinion, is strongly shaped by our economic situation because we are such a wealthy country. If I think about myself here now, the food that I ate today, I didn't cook, I didn't grow. The clothes I'm wearing, I didn't sew. When I plugged my phone into the charger, I didn't make that electricity. I didn't design my phone. I didn't program it. We're consumers.
Yeah.
From the day we're born, and of course, children are the ultimate consumer, right? Babies, the ultimate
They're
consumer.
experts at consuming.
That's all they do, right? When you're initially born, you just scream your head off to get the things that you need. But at some stage in our life, we're actually meant to change our perspective and realize we're part of the system that produces.
Okay, to set this up, let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some of you will be familiar with it. Nick was just talking about the economy and all the micro pieces coming together to make a macro economy, in effect. But what we've got is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we'll put it on the screen. There are 5 levels, starting with the very, very basic things, with shelter and food and water, and then moving up to safety and health and property, and then moving up through the levels, you can see on screen, to the very top. So you're talking about this wealthy economy, this consumer economy. What's under threat, coming under threat in the next 2, 3, 4, 6 months is the ability, the discretionary expenditure that people are going to have. This $100 becoming $200 in food, you said before, something has to give. So if I'm getting my nails done, and you can see, do you like the colour?
Yeah, love it.
If I'm getting my nails done, or if I'm doing origami lessons, or if I'm maybe having a holiday, or I'm a member of a Pinot Noir club, those discretionary expenditures are not on the first 2 levels. They're on the next, the next ones up. So what we'll have to give here, and this is where we're going, I think, and this has a really significant impact on the way people live their lives, their expectations. And you mentioned before about consumption and production.
Yeah, exactly. And if, as a society, we're not producing enough, then in the long run, something has to give, and we can't consume as much.
Yeah.
You can only consume what is being produced by someone, somewhere. And actually, one of the reasons why economics is so fundamental even to politics is because of that perspective of consumption versus production. Your left-wing approach to politics is that when everyone continually transacts, some people end up wealthy and other people end up poor, or poorer at least, and they don't like that. So left-wing focus is always about correcting for the natural behaviour of the economy, about redistributing wealth away from the way it naturally distributes. Whereas the right-wing approach traditionally is that you've got to allow everyone individually to make economic choices that maximise their own benefit.
Free market.
Exactly. And the idea of the free market is everyone maximising their own benefit has this collective effect of maximising everyone's. So it sits underneath our political differences. It affects our everyday lives in our ability to meet, as you say, our basic needs, but then our more advanced interests and desires using our.
Well, we're going to track through with, like I said, and there's a few economists we can talk, or commentators, if not economists. David Martin is one. Catherine Austin Fitz. You know, the whole range. I'll put them on the screen. These people are actually looking at what's been going on in culture, and we've been talking in and around it. So. I guess what we're trying to say here is that this is not divorced from what's going on globally in terms of the assault on Judeo-Christian values, the culture wars and so on. We've been talking, it's almost discretionary for us to talk about those things without fundamentally addressing the economics.
Yeah, it's called the World Economic Forum, right? It's a reason. It's their core actual interest.
Yeah. Follow the money, right?
That's right. And at the heart of any conflict over power is ultimately power to control what? Power to control the way that we remove resources around in order to meet everyone's needs, and in order to meet whose needs. That's the critical questions of the history of politics and struggles for power, wars, everything. It's all about meeting needs.
And this reset that they've been talking about, you know, is now starting to be triggered. And Catherine Austin Fitz was saying this is not a take down, it's a take out. And the crunching of the middle class. And there was also commentary about how governments are collapsing themselves. You know, so we've got intergenerational debt, we've got raging inflation in the US, highest in 46 years, I think it is. We've got gas prices going through the roof, supply chain issues. We've got an all-cause mortality rate in Australia, which is approaching 20%. Which will impact the supply chain and also the labour supply. Now, there's another question, you know, what will that do? You know, if you can't get a builder because they're no longer fit for work and so forth, then what will that do to you know, the economy? Because one thing people need to understand is that if you take people out of an economic circuit, so to speak, then they're not spending money, which means they're not going to the cafe, they're not going to buy a shirt, or they're not getting some plumbing done. So there's a multiplier, what they call the multiplier effect. The multiplier effect rippling through the economy and actually multiplying the dollars, becomes about 4.2, something like that. So as you shrink your workforce, as you slow down your supply chains, the economic impact is one of, you know, reduction. And that's what can lead to stagnation and recession. So this is no accident, folks, what's happening around us, and people are really concerned, and we just want to track it because we've been talking about culture wars, we've been talking about, you know, American politics, but this is now colliding. This is a collision, an intentional collision, I'm afraid. So that's what we're looking at.
And there are big things happening very currently. The extraordinarily high inflation, as you mentioned, extraordinarily high debt through Western countries, which are the more wealthy countries in the world. As you mentioned, workforce, and we can relate those to the policies that governments had, policies like minimum wage, policies like the tax settings. It's sometimes intentional that the government is actually using debt to finance its actions rather than using taxes. There's an effect that has. So we mentioned intergenerational debt. We're going to talk about that as well. So all of these things
Fasten
all
your
adding
seatbelt.
up.
Fasten your seatbelt.
They're current. They're all happening now.
Yeah, people are really concerned, and you know, people with their wealth in cash, their wealth in gold, and there's been some commentaries about not being able to move gold around cross border. So where do you store your wealth? How do you access your wealth? Digital identity. All these things we've been talking about in the last few weeks are sitting around this topic of economia, economics.
Yeah.
And now the play is being made, you know, and this is really starting to look incredibly serious. We were listening to some data coming out of the States, 800,000 fewer jobs at the moment than there was, I think it was 3 months ago or a year.
No, it was the start of 2020.
Start of 2020,
like the pre-pandemic comparison.
So 800,000 fewer jobs. That's 800,000 fewer people spending money. They're now oil dependent, not an oil exporter, and so forth. And you just got back from the UK.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the big crises at the moment is, of course, energy supply. Energy being one of the fundamental resources underpinning everything else. In the UK, they're looking at this coming winter. If it's a severe winter, people having to make eat or heat decisions. That is, you decide whether you're going to have food or whether you're going to heat your home. Because the cost of energy and the cost of food both going up at once.
So this is getting back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Exactly. You're dealing with the bottom.
The bottom, right? Yeah. So forced choice, opportunity cost, do I heat or do I eat?
And anecdotally on that, I think this is something that is going to involve a change in perspective for people in Australia. We don't realise the extent to which we take for granted the wealth that we've grown up with. So I was at this conference in the UK, and they had a presentation about what do Gen Z, what do the new generation of employees care about when it comes to their job? And the top things were, does your job have broad social impact? You know, does it challenge you and stimulate your mind? You know, does your job have development and career pathways for you? And way down the list was money. Does your job give you enough money?
Yeah, I've heard about money.
But the problem is you can only put that way down the list if you are taking it for granted.
Well, that's the Maslow's hierarchy. I mean, that's
the moment you don't have that one, all of those other things, they stop mattering.
Self-esteem and self-actualization right at the top. That's what that is. I want a job that does all those things. Well, actually, no, it's about production. We talked about before, not just consumption, but what value actually adding here, right?
Yeah.
So this is a reset, folks. It's a reset on what we think is important, where we spend our time, where we spend our money, and do we have the capacity as a nation to get through this? Because this is looking to be a pretty tough little gig coming up.
Yeah, I think we're entering a tough period because of a number of things that have been set up effectively to make it tough, whether deliberate or not. There's both effects coming together. But in the post-pandemic period, but also in Australia, where we've got aging infrastructure, some of which we just simply haven't been replacing, we're reaching a point where we're going to have difficulty meeting our needs with our existing economy. And we're doing that whilst having a government that's bloated, that has massive debt and no real foreseeable pathway to reduce that debt. And so as a result, what's giving is actually the value of money itself, and that's inflation. And so all of those things coming together, how that's going to be navigated, we're not going to claim that we can see the future.
No.
But we can at least explain what we're seeing today.
Well, one of the things that we're going to see is that the US has got inflation off the scale, right? And that's going to be their greatest export to us in the next 6 to 12 months. That's what will happen. So the cost of funding debt and so forth will go out and blow out, and the impacts for our economy we'll have a J curve, as they call it, or a lag, but in the next 3 to 6 months this will come through. So people will be forced to make decisions on that hierarchy of needs. Think about schooling, for example. You're spending $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 on private schooling. Can you afford to do that? Do you actually have to make some adjustments? Do you go public schooling? Do you go homeschooling? I mean, not just for culture wars and protecting the ethics and the morality of your children, but economically, can you afford it? So there's a reset here in terms of household decision making. This is going to have lots of impacts, and the people we're talking to are already alert to this, and they're starting to say how to, and the information coming out from the US in particular, and also now from Australia, is getting into communities where you can barter, where you can get support, where you can probably grow your own food hydroponically, for example. So they're actually talking down to that level. That's where this is going. So to get off grid if you can, but not to be and do as much as you can in cash. I mean, this is really serious stuff. So the days of getting your nails painted, sorry Nick, but they're over. The days of learning origami might be over. The days of taking a little holiday or joining a Pinot Noir club, we're going to be forced to make decisions. And that will ripple through the economy.
And one of the things that I think is important to realise about the economy, often those who focus on the economy and on the right wing are accused of being essentially insensitive and not caring about the poor, not caring about those who have less. But what matters is that whenever you hit the economy at any level, it's those who are poorest who suffer first.
Yeah, well, the heat or eat. I mean, those decisions.
Exactly. It's not going to be the wealthy people making those decisions. No. It's like when they targeted the oligarchs in Russia. The oligarchs themselves don't suffer because the rich people know how to protect themselves from the problems that they have using their money. And it's the poor who ultimately have to balance the equation.
They've got options, and that's the point of the point of money, is give you options, which gives you a sense of relative power. The people without the options don't have the choices, and they get caught, right? And so this global reset, the WF thing, which we've been talking about, is actually about coming in and taking an advantage of that. So we'll lay out the conversation in the context of those broader topics that we've been talking about, culture wars, you know, WF, digital identity, because they are levers of control, and we can now see clearly what's been happening since 2020 and where this has been tracking. Now there's a move on, and now there's some really serious stuff going down. So stay with us. We'll get into this over the next week or two or three. We'll get some people in to make some commentary and add some value, because fascinating topic. Not boring, not dry, not sterile. It's about living, it's about life choices, it's about our capacity and our ability as people to understand what's going on and to get through what's going to be an incredibly challenging time for many. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.